What's up, friends? I'm Jeremy, and I'm so glad to be here with you as we continue in our series called Every Day. It's about the everyday things we can do to connect with God and grow a faith that goes with us everywhere into everything. Honestly, that's one of my favorite things. You see, when you care about something so much, you can't help but talk about it with other people. For example, what's something you really love right now? Something you're super into and can't stop talking about. One of my all-time favorite things is football. I played football, and when it's football season, I'm fully locked in. In fact, when I was in middle school, one of my favorite things was not just talking about football with all my friends, but it was also talking football trading cards. You see, we loved huddling up to see who had what and how we could hustle to trade each other up. And today, it's something I continue to enjoy doing and talking about with my young son. Whether it's a movie we saw, a place we visited, a sport we played, or a hobby we've picked up, we love talking about the things we're super into because we want other people to be into them too. We want other people to experience what we've experienced. We love the World Series, and we talk all about it to our friends so they'll get into it too. We're really into that one show on Netflix, and we can't quit telling everybody around us to watch it. We love playing video games so much that it's become the biggest part of our conversations at school. We're all about those new makeup tutorials on TikTok that we keep sharing them with everyone we know. Talking about the stuff we're really into is easy to make an everyday thing in our lives, right? Can I let you in on something? Talking about God can actually be the same. Even in our groups at church, we all come to conversations about faith from different angles. Some of us are here because we believe in God and love learning about how to grow our faith. Some of us are here because we're new to or curious about faith and want to discover more. Some of us feel hurt by God, faith, or even by other Christians, and that makes wanting to connect with God again complicated. And some of us are here not because we want to be or care to be, but because for one reason or another, we have to be. I'd say that no matter why you're here, this conversation can meet you where you are. Even in just showing up, you're taking a step to at least think about and talk about God. And the more we talk about God, the more we'll know about God. The more we know God, the more we'll want other people to know God too. Like with everything we love, eventually, we'll want others to experience what we've experienced. Still, I get the idea of talking about God can be intimidating. We might feel like we don't know where to start. We don't have the right words or the best answers or all the Bible verses memorized that we need to talk about God. Or we might just feel like it's super awkward. We're not the kind of person who loves talking to people in general, especially about something big like faith. And we definitely don't want to make someone uncomfortable or end up in a weird religious debate. We might not even be sure if we believe in God. So we feel like we can't talk about it until we figure it out. Ultimately, we decide to say nothing. Why does that matter? Well, because talking about God is one big way we can connect with God. It's good for our relationship with God to talk about what we trust about God and unpack why we trust it. And with that, it's good for the people in our lives to hear about it. It helps them understand more about who we are, how we've experienced God in our lives, and how perhaps they can experience God in the same way. And what I've noticed is that when people talk about what they're passionate about and believe strongly in, others tend to listen. If this whole idea of talking about God freaks you out, I promise, it doesn't have to be as intimidating as you might think. In fact, what if you thought about it this way? Instead of talking about what you know about God, you can talk about who you know God to be. That's actually what helped the church get started. 2,000 plus years ago, the church was started by a handful of people who were passionate about one specific person, Jesus. Early believers couldn't necessarily answer every single question about Jesus, but they didn't let that stop them. They were so excited about who they'd experienced in Jesus, so they talked about him a lot, even if they didn't know all the details. In the New Testament, the book of Acts gives us an amazing picture of what this looked like. Two of Jesus' friends and followers, Peter and John, talked a lot about Jesus. Keep in mind, Peter was the same dude who denied being a Jesus follower when Jesus was arrested, beaten, and eventually crucified. But after Jesus resurrected from the dead, Peter became passionate about Jesus. Luke tells us in Acts 3 that Peter and John healed a man born crippled. Chaos ensued, which tends to happen when a man who had never walked could then run around in unmatched joy. People were absolutely shocked at this miracle, and Peter and John used the opportunity to tell everyone who would listen about Jesus. As they did, a few religious leaders noticed something. Take a look. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. It was obvious to the religious leaders of the time that Peter and John weren't trained or educated in talking about their faith. They didn't know as many details as other people might have. They probably wouldn't have won a debate about all the things Jesus said and did. But what they did know still mattered. They knew who Jesus was. They knew him because they'd experienced him. They had a real relationship and connection with him. So that's what they talked about. That's what left the people listening so amazed. The more Peter and John talked about Jesus, the more everyone around them not only realized that they knew what they were talking about, but also who they were talking about. And their talking about God so passionately inspired others to consider following Jesus themselves. Here's what I think these two knew was important. We can talk about God every day. Because of how Peter and John talked about God, many of the people around them wanted to know God too. Here's what's cool. We can be like Peter and John today. We may not know all the answers, but we can know God. We can talk about what we've experienced. We can share what we hope to learn about God as we grow in faith. We can talk about God not just so other people will know God better, but so that we'll know God better too. We can talk about God every day. The more we share our thoughts, experiences, and even questions about God with others, the more we'll be challenged to keep talking, keep growing, and keep getting to know God ourselves. And that will help us make sharing about God part of our everyday faith. Easier said than done, right? It's one thing to know that we can talk about God every day as a way to connect, but it's another thing to actually do it. Here are a few things I want us to remember to make this a little easier this week. First, know that you don't need to know everything about God to talk about God. Peter and John weren't the smartest or the most educated people. They were just two guys who knew Jesus personally. They got to know God in real ways, and they let that motivate them to talk about God to others. They weren't looking to debate or prove a point or be seen as the most educated religious people around. They were simply looking to share about their experiences with God. So, as you consider how you can make talking about God part of your everyday faith, try doing the same. Focus on who you're talking about instead of worrying about needing to know all the answers and details. We can share more about who God is and how God has impacted our lives. Sometimes we don't know how to talk about how God created the world. Maybe instead, we can talk about how we see God's creativity in the world around us. While we may not be able to explain why bad things happen, we can talk about how God comforts and supports us when bad things do happen. If we can't explain the details of the story of Jesus' death and resurrection, we can still talk about what the events mean for our lives and faith today. If you've experienced God, you can talk about God. All you need to share is what you know about God from the relationship and faith that you have right now. A good place to start by talking about what has happened in your own life. If you've seen God answer a prayer, share that. If you've seen God change your attitude towards someone who has hurt you, talk about that. If you've ever seen God do anything, big or small, in your life or the life of someone you know, tell it. Tell your stories. Talk about what you've experienced. Focus on who God is to you. And if you're not sure about who God is to you, my encouragement would be to start talking about what you're not so sure of. Share the questions, doubts, and confusion you have with someone like a parent, a trusted friend, or your small group leader. Be brave enough to start the conversation about God and see what happens from there. Because remember, talking about God won't just help others know God better. Talking about God helps us know God better too. That's why it's important to make it a part of our everyday faith. We can talk about God every day. Just think about what might happen if we chose to give this a try. That's the way the message of Jesus has been spread over the last 2,000 years. And I think we can be a part of continuing that movement. We can share our stories, doubts, experiences, and questions about God with the people around us. And a great place to start is in your small group. Small groups are a place where you can talk about anything. These groups are here to help you know God better. And one way to do that is to talk to each other about where you are with God right now. Practice talking about God with each other and encourage each other as you do. To start that conversation in small group, I want you to think about this question. What's one thing about God that I can share with someone else?